our focus has been militarism, which we defined as the glorification on one hand, the endless expansion, and the aggressive use. Is not just theoretical, it's practical, the aggressive use of military power and armed violence. First and foremost, militarism is not equal to military. All over the world, all nation states do have military. I think only major countries such as Iceland and Costa Rica do not have an armed force. A few others in the Pacific as well. But militarism and military are really different things. Militarism is often state-based, in fact, but not only. And today there are plenty of groups from guerrilla to liberation movement that may be defined as militaristic. But what we focused on is the fog of militarism. Some of you may remember the fog of war, which is a way of saying that spells out a lot. And the cultural hegemony of militarism that we see fairly evident today in our institutions, in the fact, as I tried to mention before, that our humanity is progressively diminished, and in the fact that many of us feel that ourselves and the future generation are becoming more and more insecure rather than more and more secure. So the power of militarism is clearly evident. The budgets dedicated to the military and more are huge and increasing. Profits of military industry and entrepreneurs, the same, they are increasing. As Paul Srivastava reminded us several times, the research and development operation, including in major universities throughout the world, are humongous. The media are just normalizing wars and the violent dispossessions all over. And very interesting, there is never accountability for military disasters. And all of us who reach, especially those who reach my age, have seen so many such disasters from Vietnam, Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, Ukraine, you name it. Accountability never provided or asked. In fact, when there are different views about military processes and adventures, they are obscured or repressed. As early as 1968, a British scientist called Kidron coined the word permanent war economy. And there are very few doubts that most of us live in permanent war economy today. And that militarism has direct impact, there are even fewer doubts. Impact on people, killing and maiming on large scale, and the long-term suffering of a post-conflict, disorders, disability, the families are broken up, the sense of trust and hope in the future is destroyed. There are plenty of diseases even left over from the battleground in pollution, in destruction, and so on. There are also direct impacts on democracy, like Delphine Ganapin reminded us very strongly. Back in the coup d'etat, dictatorships, and maintaining what can only be described as grotesque economic inequality around the world. There are direct impacts on nature. The relentless expropriation of land, water, minerals, and the extractive industries that benefit powerful social sectors and powerful countries is enabled by militarism. Very few would let their environment being completely destroyed, if not that they would face repression, and or if they are even governments, they would face coup d'etat, orchestrated uprising, and so on. So you can even see the systemic reality of militarism, which depends upon the exploitation of nature because it consumes mineral, oil and gas, land and water, but is crucial to enable the plunder of nature that gets all this taken care of. There are also huge indirect impacts on the well-being of everybody today, because the resources that are fueled into militarism are taken away from other uses. Food and water, public health, education, all the dimension of well-being, democracy, and justice that are neglected. And as it has been stressed by some anthropologists mostly, the fact that militarism colonizes our minds, colonizes the social and imaginative parts of our minds, and in fact, in many ways, hybridizes war and peace in our thinking. And on future generation, precluding all that could build a better future tomorrow. So diplomatic initiatives, political agreements, and all the investment necessary to avoid damages, to create a positive future, to prevent climate change, as Andy has suggested in his talks and in his comments many times. Unique feature to militarism. Well, one is that we live in democracies, but who can declare that we are in a state of exception to democracy? Only the few in power, and they justify the secret and illegal operation that are crucial for militarism. There is another point is secrecy. Nothing is as secret as the military, because military information is classified and intelligence is for the very few. There is a near monopoly on means of lethality, surveillance, and control. There are deep ties with the underworld. This is something that surprised me when I researched for this presentation, how profound are the ties between militarism and the world of the gangs, the bandits, the drug traffic, arms traffic. And there is uniquely immunity from accountability, as I mentioned before. Usually the military are heroes no matter what. And while most of us are busy on the survival treadmills, there are those who never make mistakes. So there is a major, as you all know, military industrial complex with even lots of further ripples in finance, in media, in academia, and in the political realm, of course. And I'm not going to go into this intricate complexity, but just saying that the ties, the relations are overt. For instance, lobbying, much of these connecting ties are covert, including corruption. There is plenty of alternatives being forcefully suppressed. And as mentioned before, accountability and dissent are suppressed. The military, industrial, etc. complex is self-justified most of the time, self-sustaining, and self-regenerating. There are other links that are very important. As in fact, Faizi reminded us, there are links with colonial and imperial history, and very fascinating with the frontier mentality of capitalism. The military is essential to advance to the frontier. There are links with narratives that promote distrust, fear, and racism, and the dehumanization of enemies. And all that has been studied by Michel Foucault and others, the relations with the control over the bodies of others, cruelty, the capriciousness of someone with a gun who decides life and death, and humiliation of others, torture, atrocities, imprisonment, apartheid. All these relations with the bodies of others are extremely important for militarism. And then there are all the economic ties already mentioned a bit with the financial sector and global economy, where profits are private and losses are socialized, as Mark Halle suggested us, with the plundering of nature for the privileged few, and with the technological development that prepare what can only be imagined as a dystopic future, because let's go on like this with AI targeting of civilians, with micro drones, chemical and biological warfare, and where are we going? Well, still unique to militarism, and I haven't mentioned it yet, is the most severe existential risk to humanity, which is nuclear war, the exquisite byproduct of militarism. In a limited nuclear war would kill millions of people if we are lucky and render areas uninhabitable. An all-out nuclear war would trigger a nuclear winter that would wipe out most of civilization and biological diversity on the planet, including ourselves. We all know this, but the capacity to destroy ourselves is still there. We are not yet decreasing it as it should be. And in fact, the US of A has in the last few decades unilaterally withdrawn from most international nuclear agreement. I don't know if you remember him. I do remember him. He was a hero of mine. E.P. Thompson, an amazing historian and scholar from the UK. He talked about exterminism, militarism as a transnational exterminism structure that would spell out the end of human race. And in a very interesting issue of an anthropology magazine that came out in 2019, Gusterson and Westermann recalled this work and asked, will we end in a self-destructive, genocidal exterminism spasm, which is really not something to be desired. Before and trying to avoid that, we should not forget that militarism has consequences today. The fact that as nature is degraded and humanity diminished and militarism is rewarding its own acolytes, a huge gap increasingly separates the super rich from the billions of dispossessed, as noted in our call to action. So the super rich believe that they will be saved, and many people, some in our group, hope and insist that all must be saved. But how do we do that? So one step back to consider, and I will talk about one element of this and then leave it to Michelle. And this element is what is described as cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony has been studied by many wonderful scholars, starting from Antonio Gramsci, and it is a way to describe a dominant worldview in a diverse society, which is comprising concepts, norm, explanation, perception, values, all that pulled together shapes and perpetuates the accepted sense of reality, normality in society. And cultural hegemony, the scholars tell us, is shaped by the ruling class by a combination of hard power and soft power, and is often accepted by all the other classes, which some not very kindly call us sheeple rather than people, without much questioning. And this does not explain all of what goes on, but I should go into the details, but I will not because I'm talking too much probably. Is that cultural hegemony? What are the soft power? Well, for instance, the ideological institution that shape all of us, from family to religion, education, and ethnicity, like Edward Said talked so powerfully and beautifully about Orientalism. But there are also all the avenues that Noam Chomsky has described as manufacturing consent. The media, advertisement, entertainment, academia, science, and so on. There are also the hard power means of cultural hegemony. First and foremost, the material conditions that shape inequality in society, like the privileges, like living in a healthy environment rather than in a poor, filthy, and crowded environment, or the disciplinary systems, the sharing of benefits and losses of production. And then overpowering everything else, soft and hard, are the structure of power in society that influence and coerce everything else. The political decisions that are taken by top politicians, but often they are just like a screen for Secret Service covert operation, and importantly, as we were reminded recently, the corporation and the finances that are controlling pretty much everything behind it. So I thought that I would come up with a couple of quotes just to make the point. The first is from John Foster Dulles, 1939. In order to bring a nation to support the burdens incident to maintaining a great military establishment, it is necessary to create an emotional state akin to war psychology. There must be the portrayal of an external menace. This involves the development of a high degree of the nation hero, nation villain ideology, and the arousing of the population to a sense of the duty of sacrifice. Mass emotion on a substantial scale is prerequisite. A sense of peril from abroad must be cultivated. This is already 1939, and this is something that I found 2 days ago in the bulletin, the newsletter of a favorite journalist of mine. The average human life is dominated by mental stories. If you can control the stories that humans are telling each other about the world, you can control the humans. This is Kathleen Johnston. So the question is militarism embedded in our own cultural hegemony? It certainly is in the material conditions and structure of power, the hard power, the inequality we see it facing us, the amount of military bases, the budget for the military, nuclear weapons, all the dependency of our economies, and the power of overt and covert operation of militarism, the hawkishness and cynicism of different political parties, all evident in front of us, as well as the ideological institutions, the continuous creation of threats, first for the Cold War, now is terrorism. We need military might, we need defense, and the manufacturing consent from political discourse to all media. Any chance to escape? Well, if you really look coldly, there are extremely few chances to escape. Possibly, enhanced consciousness of the ideological institutions and avenues of manufacturing consent, and or willful change, revolutionary or reformist of the material conditions and the structure of power that rule upon us. And maybe the new technologies, such as the communication we are using today, can be of some help. This is my last slide, and I'm passing on to Michelle. Our group is about, for as I see it, this enhanced consciousness and this willful change to change militarism as cultural hegemony for all of us. Mark Halle, several meetings ago, reminded us that relevant social-cultural change can take place, and even quite rapidly. He reminded us about slavery and child labor being changed after a long period, but just sort of in a matter of a couple of decades in a society that was strongly dependent on those. And then we have similar examples with women voting rights, the normality today of homosexual marriage, which was not so until a few decades ago. So the hope is that militarism someday can be ostracized by more mature societies. I've taken the words of Mark actually, the financial and economic actors, politicians and media that peddle militarism and war could become pariah and be unequivocally placed outside the social norm. This is the kind of hope, at least, I mean, I should talk for myself, that motivates me to discuss militarism and to try to do something about it together with all of you, hoping that our group can contribute to a society that, as the Club of Rome was saying, expands solidarity in time and space and promotes shared security, not just security for some at the expenditures of others, fitting a more humane, peaceful, and just future. So this is my summary of what has been going on until today in our group. I'll stop sharing, and I do hope that there will be enough comments to make this interesting. Thank you so much.